Loitering? In this neighborhood? With that pregnant belly? That's what he said, right before driving his boot into the stomach of a woman 7 months pregnant. No warning. No cause. Not a shred of humanity. Fruit scattered across the pavement. Milk spilled in all directions. And a mother collapsed like hope itself had been crushed. But what he didn't know was that woman was the wife of a former elite special operative. And her husband? He was prepared to use every combat skill he'd ever learned to bring down an entire system. What state are you watching from? And where you live, does justice come in only one color? Now, let's uncover the story behind it all. Late afternoon in Bridgemont, Georgia. The last rays of sunlight sliced through crimson leaves, casting long shadows across the Ridgeview Plaza parking lot. Everything was calm, until a sudden screech of brakes shattered the silence, making the entire block freeze for a heartbeat. A blue and white patrol car skidded across the road and came to a halt just feet away from a black woman. Camille Vance, 36, 7 months pregnant, instinctively stepped back. She had just exited the grocery store, arms full with a paper bag of vegetables, fruit, and a few items for dinner, a long coat draped over her round belly. Her hair was neatly tied at the nape of her neck. Her face carried the weariness of a long day, but still held its gentle calm, until Officer Halvorsen, 40, stepped out of the cruiser, his stride sharp, his eyes cold as steel. "Stay right there," he barked. Dry, commanding, like she'd just committed a major crime. Camille froze. She glanced around, hoping someone had seen it, but passers-by lowered their heads and hurried away. No one wanted to get involved with Bridgemont police, especially not with Halvorsen, well known in the area for his threats, slurs, and abuse toward black residents. I just finished shopping and I'm heading home," Camille said quietly but firmly. Her hand came to rest on her belly, a mother's instinct in the face of danger. "You're loitering in a neighborhood you don't belong in," Halvorsen snapped. "I don't need more trouble from people like you." "People like me?" Camille asked, eyebrows furrowed. Even that soft reply was gasoline on fire. Halvorsen stepped closer. His hand hovered near his holstered gun. His eyes gleamed with mocking menace. "You think you're smart?" he growled. Camille tightened her grip on the grocery bag. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't back down. "I just want to go home. Please let me leave." Around them, a few bystanders began filming with their phones. Some kept a cautious distance, but their eyes were locked on the scene. Halvorsen noticed and puffed up, growing more arrogant. "I said stay put," he yelled, suddenly lunging forward and shoving Camille hard on the shoulder. "I'm pregnant." Camille cried out in panic, but that warning didn't stop him. The kick came a split second later. No warning, no reason, no mercy. Camille bent forward, both hands clutching her belly, and collapsed onto the cold concrete. An apple, a carrot, a carton of milk spilled from the paper bag, rolling in every direction like the last bits of hope scattering from her eyes. A sound tore from Camille's throat, a cry, a plea, and a scream of pain all in one. It echoed across the empty lot. No one turned away now. A woman screamed, "Oh my God, she's pregnant." Halvorsen glanced at the growing crowd with defiant eyes, as if daring someone to stop him. But this time he was wrong. Those phones weren't just recording anymore. They were sparking a wave. And that kick, lasting less than a second, would change Camille Vance's life forever. As the green lights of the ambulance flashed down Bridgemont Parkway, Darius Vance was wrapping up his shift in a warehouse near the city's outer industrial zone. Once a rapid response special forces operator, he now worked at a cargo distribution center, living the quiet life he'd dreamed of ever since leaving the military. But that fragile peace shattered with a single phone call. His phone vibrated relentlessly in his pocket. On the screen, Trey, his old friend from high school, now a security guard at Ridgeview Plaza. When Darius picked up, Trey's voice came through, shaking, broken. "Camille! She was attacked by a cop right there in the parking lot. They're rushing her to St. Aurora Medical. Darius, man, you have to get there now." That was all it took. Darius dropped his gloves on the concrete floor, bolted his truck, and peeled out of the lot. His Ford F-150 roared down the narrow lanes between the warehouses before skidding hard onto Main Boulevard. His heart pounded like a war drum. Fragments of Trey's words spun in his mind. Cop? Kicked her pregnant blood. His hands gripped the wheel until his knuckles turned white, his eyes burning like smoldering steel. 18 minutes later, Darius screeched to a stop at the ER entrance of St. Aurora Medical Center. He charged through the hallway, beneath flickering fluorescent lights and the sharp sting of antiseptic. Camille Vance. My wife. Where is she? He shouted. A nurse led him to the trauma bay. Through the glass, he saw Camille lying on a hospital bed, her face pale, her lines trailing from both arms. One hand rested gently on her belly, where fragile life was still fighting to survive. He stepped inside. Her eyes fluttered open. Darius, her voice barely a breath. He kicked me. Darius dropped to his knees beside the bed, clutching her cold hand in his. He bit his lip until it bled, just to keep from screaming. The pain in his chest was a dull, jagged blade, one that couldn't be pulled out, only endured. He placed a hand over her stomach, where their unborn son now waged a silent battle between life and death. The eyes that had once seen war now brimmed with tears. He could no longer hold back. I'm here, he whispered, and I swear I won't let this be forgotten. That night, Darius didn't sleep. He sat beside Camille's bed until dawn, not just as her husband, but as a soldier once again on the front line. Only this time, the battlefield wasn't in the deserts of the Middle East. It was here, in the heart of America, and the enemy wasn't some foreign force. It was the very system that had sworn to protect people like Camille. Morning came to Bridgemont with chill in the air and the scent of orange blossoms drifting from the rows of townhomes on the city's west side. But inside Darius Vance, there was no peace. He sat alone at a corner table inside Ivy Ridge Cafe, once a quiet date spot for him and Camille. Now, it had become an unofficial command post for a war he never imagined he'd have to fight, on home soil. In front of him lay an old, worn notebook, the same one that had traveled with him through countless special ops missions. Faint pencil lines marked out procedures for investigations, data analysis, target identification, behavioral tracking. Written during years spent confronting organized crime overseas. Now, he was using those very same skills to hunt down a police officer in his own hometown. Step 1. Trace Halvorsen's footprint. Darius scoured the internet for any public records on Officer Trent Halvorsen and quickly ran into a wall of silence. No official violations on file. Every complaint marked as resolved internally. But Darius knew how to read between the lines. Cases closed for insufficient evidence or lack of credible witnesses pointed to one thing, a well-oiled cover-up machine. He moved to step 2, eyewitnesses. Through social media, he found an anonymous video, grainy footage of Camille's assault, posted with a simple caption, "Bridgemont needs to wake up." The poster remained nameless, but the voice screaming in the background was unmistakable. It was Loretta McLean, an elderly woman who used to live near them, always bringing Camille cookies during the holidays. Darius paid her a visit at her home in Westmore Heights community, a modest house sat by an aging intersection, its porch wrapped in flowering vines. When she opened the door and saw him, she didn't look surprised. She just gave a slow nod and stepped aside to let him in. "I recorded it because I couldn't stay silent," she said, eyes brimming. "He kicked Camille like she wasn't even human. I'm willing to testify. No one should have to go through that, especially not a mother." That afternoon, Darius called a small meeting inside the old reading room at the Central Library. Across the table sat 3 people he once trusted with his life in combat. Now a lawyer, a journalist, and a human rights advocate. Mira Ellison, renowned civil rights attorney, now with Keystone Legal Alliance. Reed Mallory, investigative reporter for Channel 8, Civic Watch News. And Sienna Ford, an independent journalist, known for exposing state-level political scandals. He unrolled a city map and marked every known complaint involving Halvorsen. As the red pins formed a crescent around the black residential zones, Mira broke the silence. This isn't random. It's a pattern of targeted patrols, intentional, deliberate. The room fell quiet. They all understood they weren't just up against one man. Darius tapped the table with 2 fingers. This isn't just about justice for Camille. We're digging into the roots of a rotted system. And I won't stop until we rip that root out. Everyone looked at him. No one spoke. But every head nodded. The counterattack had begun. A week after the assault on Camille, Bridgemont, Georgia was hit with an unexpected cold snap. The skies were gray, but at Kennedy Square, the tension in the air was rising by the minute. Hundreds gathered around a makeshift wooden podium, where Darius Vance was about to reveal the truth they'd all been denied. To the left of the podium stood Mira Ellison, the lead attorney officially representing the Vance family. On the right was Reed Mallory, investigative journalist for Channel 8, Civic Watch News, who had committed to broadcasting the press conference live across the entire state. Behind them loomed a massive LED screen, ready to project video footage to the public. At the base of the platform, volunteers held up signs. Hashtag Justice for Camille. Stop Bridgemont brutality. Darius stepped up to the mic, his face tight with focus, his eyes unwavering. In his hands, a thick dossier bound tight with cord. He scanned the crowd briefly, then nodded to Reed to begin. Today, I'm not here just to speak about my wife, Darius began, his voice low but clear. I'm here to speak about a system that is broken. The screen behind him lit up, displaying the footage, shot by a bystander, of the moment Camille was kicked in the stomach. The image of her collapsing onto the concrete, clutching her belly, her scream slicing through silence, filled the plaza. The crowd went still. Some covered their mouths, tears springing to their eyes. Others turned away, unable to watch. Next appeared a map marked with 12 red dots, each one representing a location in the black community where Officer Halvorsen had been accused of misconduct. Darius pointed to the pattern. This is not isolated. This is a model of oppression shielded by power. He revealed additional reports that had been buried, complaints that had all been handled internally by Chief Vernon Pike. A phrase, Darius said, that had become a shield for the abusers. Then came an unexpected shift. As Darius concluded his speech, a woman's voice called out from the back of the crowd. You're right. I was one of Halvorsen's victims, too. All heads turned. A white woman in her 50s stepped forward. She wore a brown coat, her graying hair pulled back, and held an old photograph, a skinny teenage boy, her son. In 2016, my boy was stopped by Halvorsen while biking home. He beat him so badly my son suffered brain trauma. And guess what? The file disappeared. No investigation. Nothing. A ripple of outrage surged through the crowd. Her story broke the dam. 3 more stepped up, a father, a college student, a veteran, each with a story of being abused, silenced, dismissed. Within hours, Darius' speech and flood of testimonies spread like wildfire. The hashtag Justice for Camille climbed to the #1 trending topic in Georgia within 3 hours. Major outlets, Atlanta Herald, Southeast Tribune, and even NBC National, picked up the story. Sienna Ford, the independent journalist, launched a live stream that drew in hundreds of thousands of viewers. On air, she declared, Bridgemont doesn't just have one toxic officer. It has a system that chose silence to protect itself. But today, that silence shattered. That evening, in room 403 of St. Aurora Medical Center, Camille awoke from a long, pain-heavy sleep. Darius was at her side, still holding her hand. In the corner of the room, a small TV played Darius' speech for the 5th time. Camille opened her eyes and looked at him. Tears traced down her cheeks. You did it, she whispered weakly. I'm not done, Darius said softly, leaning closer. This is just the beginning. A light rain tapped against the awning of St. Aurora Medical Center, playing a gentle rhythm above the quiet morning, like a soundtrack to the moment Camille sat up for the first time in over 10 days. The doctors called it a medical miracle, but Darius knew the truth. It was her will that kept her alive. Camille Vance, 36, was still weak, but the haze in her eyes was gone. In its place burned something quiet, unmistakable, a fire. On the bedside table lay the morning paper. The front page showed a photo of Darius at the press conference, holding up the thick dossier. Beneath it, the headline read, The husband stands up, but will the victim be heard? Camille folded the paper, set aside, and turned to her husband. Darius, I don't want to be just a victim. Not this time. He frowned, concerned. You need rest. The doctor said, people need to see I'm still here. That one kick didn't silence me. 2 days later, Camille was wheeled out of a hospital elevator and into a specially arranged press conference, hosted right on the hospital grounds by Channel 8, Civic Watch News. The lights from the cameras flared. All of Georgia was watching. Darius stood behind her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. Mira Ellison sat beside her, ready to step in if needed. And then, silence. Camille raised her head. Her voice wasn't loud, but each word landed with clarity. My name is Camille Vance. I'm 36 years old. I am a wife, a mother, and a citizen of Bridgemont. 2 weeks ago, I was kicked in the stomach by a police officer because he thought I didn't belong here. But let me tell you, I was born here. I taught school in Westmore Heights. I shop at that grocery store every week. This is my city, and I won't be silenced or pushed out of the place I call home. The room held its breath. Camille continued. She spoke of the pain, the fear she felt when she thought she might lose her child, the despair in the eyes of the bystanders when no one stepped forward. I don't blame them. I understand fear, but we can't let fear keep leading us. Today, I'm standing up, not just for myself, but for those whose voices have been choked off for years. Her words were broadcast live. In just 24 hours, her speech surpassed 4 million views across social media. News outlets from the Southeast Tribune to NBC Nightly News quoted her. One line struck like thunder. Don't call me a victim. Call me a survivor. And I will use my voice to speak for those who no longer can. That evening, outside the hospital, a small group of mothers gathered, holding candles and handmade signs that read, We stand with Camille. Darius stood by the hospital window, his eyes stinging. Beside him, Camille leaned her head gently on his shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. Now, I'm not just the reason you fight. I'm your partner in it. Across town, on the second floor of the Bridgemont Police Division, fluorescent lights cast a dull glare over the hallway. The air reeked of stale coffee, old paperwork, and the quiet sweat of a department under siege. News clips of Camille Vance's speech filled every screen. Officers passing the break room avoided eye contact, as if everyone knew, but no one dared to say it out loud. Officer Nolan Creed, 29, younger than most of his peers, sat alone in the internal records room, eyes locked on his computer monitor. Multiple files were open. Complaint forms, crime scene photos, original reports and strange, amended versions, altered at the request of higher-ups. One file caught his eye, Camille Vance. Instead of reading, severe assault, citizen video recorded. The internal record simply stated, civilian incident, resolved on scene. No further inquiry necessary. Creed tightened his grip on the mouse. His jaw clenched. He remembered that day vividly. The unit radio had reported a minor disturbance at Ridgeview Plaza, but he'd been denied permission to respond. Now he knew why. Creed wasn't a rookie. He'd grown up in South Ridge, a working-class neighborhood on the east side of Bridgemont. His mother was a nurse. His father had died after being wrongly arrested and left to deteriorate in a holding cell. Creed had once dreamed of changing the system from within, but 3 years on the force had taught him one brutal truth. Silence was the only way to survive. Until Camille's case. That night, Creed sat in his car, parked 3 blocks from Ivy Ridge Cafe. He tapped the steering wheel, eyes darting to the dashboard clock. 8:12 p.m. He'd sent a message anonymously, encrypted. A risk, but one he had to take. He just hoped Darius Vance would show. A black SUV pulled up. The door opened. Darius stepped out, silent. His gaze was hard, sharp as tempered steel. You the one who messaged me? Creed nodded, then reached into his backpack. He pulled out a thick folder. I've got evidence, not just on Halvorsen, but the ones protecting him. Inside the darkened cafe, lights dimmed, Creed spoke. His voice low, each word heavy. They delete records, alter reports. Guys like Halvorsen, they're protected. and anyone who speaks up gets erased. Creed slid the folder across the table to Darius. Inside were copies of deleted complaints, internal emails between Chief Vernon Pike and department inspectors, and surveillance images showing evidence that had been replaced. "I know. If my name gets out, my career's over," Creed said, locking eyes with him. "But if I stay silent, I won't be able to live with myself." Darius stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "From now on, you're not alone." Outside, the wind swept down the street, carrying scraps of protest flyers from days before. One sheet landed by Creed's boot. Not everyone in uniform is the enemy. And for the first time in years, Nolan Creed felt something lift from his chest. Word of Officer Nolan Creed quietly leaking documents to Darius Vance spread like wildfire through activist networks. Though his identity remained secret to the public, inside the Bridgemont Police Division, everyone knew someone had broken ranks. No one said it outright, but the wary glances and abruptly ended conversations spoke volumes. On the other side of the line, Chief Vernon Pike and Trent Halvorsen were no longer so composed. Camille's speech, the swelling protests, and the slow trickle of leaked files into the media had shifted momentum. Their grip was slipping. One morning, as Darius arrived at the hospital carrying a warm container of porridge, he found a young nurse nervously pacing outside Camille's room. "There was a man hanging around the hallway," she whispered. "He didn't check in and said he wasn't visiting anyone. As soon as security showed up, he vanished." Darius immediately made a call to his old military unit, 3 of his closest brothers-in-arms. 2 now working private security, 1 a cybersecurity engineer, set up a temporary perimeter around the hospital. Handheld cameras, facial recognition, GPS tracking devices hidden on Camille's discharge vehicle. Nothing was left to chance. That evening back at home, Darius unlocked his phone and found an anonymous message. "You're digging too deep. Your wife wasn't the first we handled, but she might be the next not to survive." He sat motionless for a few seconds. Then he stood, walked straight into his office, opened a steel drawer under his desk, and pulled out a military-grade encryption module, the Vault Guard Series 5. "If they want to play dirty," he muttered, "I know how to play dirtier." 2 days later, investigative reporter Reed Mallory called, his voice tight with urgency. "Darius, you need to see this. They just released a video of you. It shows you arguing and threatening a cop. It's blurry, but the voice is almost identical. Maybe a 90% match. If people believe it, everything we built could collapse." Darius sat in stunned silence. The video spread fast. Comments exploded, some in support, others filled with doubt. But the police seized a moment, issuing a quiet but pointed press release. Extreme individuals should not be leading public discourse. Without hesitation, Darius called Sienna Ford, the independent journalist and AI media expert. Within an hour, she dissected the clip, acoustic fingerprinting, ear shape mapping. She had the receipts. "It's a deep fake," she confirmed. "There are micro-frame inconsistencies. The ear structure doesn't match. The voice cadence is synthetic." "I'm going live," Sienna said. "People need to see how the truth is being twisted." She paused. "But Darius, get ready. Because this counterattack, it's only the beginning." And just as predicted, the next morning, Channel 3, Bridgemont Voice, a local station known for its ties to city leadership, opened their broadcast with a blazing red headline. "From hero to suspect, doubts swirl around Darius Vance." But by now, Camille was awake. Creed had stepped forward, and Darius was ready. He appeared live on Channel 8, Civic Watch News, seated beside Camille. The caption beneath the screen read, "We're not afraid. We will not back down." Outside the hospital, cheers erupted as Camille stepped onto the balcony, her arm raised high, her lips pressed into a firm line, but her eyes burned with clarity. "Truth doesn't need defending," she said. "It only needs to be seen." It was a mild March morning, sunlight spilling over the city of Bridgemont, but the air outside the police division felt cold as steel. Hundreds gathered at the front gates of the Bridgemont Police Division, holding signs that read, Hashtag justice for Camille. Arrest him today. Behind them, cameras from Channel 8, Civic Watch News, Southeast Ledger, and a dozen independent outlets stood ready to capture a historic moment. Darius Vance stepped out of a black SUV. He wore a white shirt, black coat, and held a thick dossier in one hand. Inside it, irrefutable proof, video footage, eyewitness testimony, internal documents leaked by Officer Nolan Creed, and a report from Equal Horizon Network, EHN, confirming unlawful interference and internal obstruction by the police department. Beside him were Mira Ellison, Reed Mallory, and two attorneys from Keystone Legal Alliance. No one spoke, but their eyes burned with resolve, and their footsteps echoed like a drumbeat. As they entered the lobby, every gaze turned toward them. A desk officer moved to block their path. Purpose of visit? Darius held up the folder. We're here for a scheduled meeting with the Internal Affairs Board to present evidence related to the assault on a civilian and the cover-up involving Officer Halvorsen. Upstairs, in a private conference room, Chief Vernon Pike sat at the head of the table. His expression was stone cold, but the lines around his eyes betrayed exhaustion. Seated near him were members of the Internal Review Board and 4 senior officers. Halvorsen leaned back in his chair, arms folded, wearing a smug grin, trying hard to appear unbothered. Darius stepped forward and laid out the evidence, point by point. Each voice on the recordings, each altered line in the reports, every document Creed had smuggled out, now projected on screen. Each slide slicing deeper into the system's fabricated armor. The room grew thick with tension. And then the door swung open. Nolan Creed entered, no longer in hiding, no longer afraid. He wore his uniform, his spine straight, his gaze ablaze. "I'm the one who supplied the documents," Creed declared, "and I'm ready to testify before this entire review board." The room fell dead silent. Halvorsen suddenly shot to his feet, slamming his hand on the table. "He's a traitor. None of that holds up," he shouted, voice cracking. But this time, no one stood with him. A representative from the Internal Affairs Board calmly replied, "We've reviewed all the evidence. Based on today's submission and under the Georgia Public Accountability Act, Officer Halvorsen is hereby suspended effective immediately, and the case will be referred for criminal prosecution." The silence shattered. Halvorsen stumbled back a step, trying to steady himself. A member of the Office of Internal Oversight stepped forward, removed his badge and sidearm, and in a moment that stunned the entire room, cuffed him on the spot. "You're making a mistake. This is a circus." "I'll be back," he yelled, but his voice trembled. As Halvorsen was escorted to the main lobby, the crowd outside caught sight of him. And then, like a surge from the city's heartbeat, "Camille! Camille! Camille!" Her name echoed down the streets. Camille watched from her hospital room on the 4th floor, eyes fixed on the live stream. Tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks. She clutched Darius's hand without saying a word. Darius leaned close and whispered, "One has fallen. Now we go after the ones who protected him." 3 days after Officer Halvorsen was handcuffed and let out of the Bridgemont Police Division, the federal response began, under the command of Prosecutor Marshall Keene. Renowned for dismantling corruption rings across state agencies, an official inquiry named Operation Hollow Shield was launched. And it didn't stop with Halvorsen. Keene expanded the probe to include the entire internal affairs apparatus of Bridgemont PD, tracing altered reports, money trails, and a decade's worth of resolved internally cases. Chief Vernon Pike, 61, once hailed as a symbolic face of Bridgemont law enforcement, now became the prime target. A recovered audio file from a wiped storage system exposed Pike's direct order to alter the investigation report on Camille Vance's assault. In it, his voice was cold. "If we let one black woman spark a media storm, every one of our seats starts to shake." When the tape was released, public outrage exploded. Even previously silent officers began to speak out, filed for immunity in exchange for testimony. They provided extensive records about the internal fund, a covert pool of traffic fine revenue quietly funneled to insiders within the department. In federal custody, Halvorsen remained silent for several days. But faced with a sentence of up to 25 years, He broke. "I didn't act alone," he admitted. "I was following orders. It came from above. I kicked Camille because I thought I was covered, just like every time before." He confessed to participating in at least 11 targeted suppression operations in black neighborhoods and named 4 senior officers who had personally shielded him. At the hospital, when news broke that Trent Halvorsen's confession had been recorded and delivered to the prosecutor's office, Camille Vance didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply exhaled, holding Darius's hand. She said quietly, "The man who kicked me wasn't just one person. He was a product of a machine, one that's forgotten how to feel remorse. But I don't want our child to grow up knowing only fear. I want him to know that we can change that machine." Darius nodded. His eyes were heavy, but filled with quiet conviction. That night, Reed Mallory reported on Channel 8, Civic Watch News. Operation Hollow Shield has uncovered at least 37 cases of altered internal records, 5 concealed violent incidents, and 2 suspicious deaths never properly investigated. A special segment aired, showing Camille seated in her wheelchair, sunlight pouring through the hospital window. She didn't cry. She spoke slowly. "I don't need pity. I need people to believe that truth, even when buried, will rise again. The only thing that allows evil to win is when good people choose silence." The broadcast closed with a candlelight vigil outside the police headquarters. No chants, no shouting, just a sea of stillness, an unspoken declaration that silence would no longer be complicity. Spring came early to Bridgemont, Georgia. The ancient oaks in the Central Park had already begun to bud. In front of the newly renovated Vance Justice Initiative, once an old community center, blue and white ribbons fluttered in the breeze, the colors of hope and justice. Camille Vance, 36, stood on a modest stage in a simple white dress, her curls softly pinned behind her head. In her arms rested Kendrick Vance, her son, born after pain, now peacefully asleep in her embrace. Her voice rang out, clear and gentle, like a willow swaying in the wind. "I used to think that kick took my future away. But when I hold my son, I realize the only thing evil can take is our hope, but only if we let it." Below the stage, Darius stood among lawyers, civil rights advocates, and everyday Bridgemont citizens who had walked every step of the journey with them. Signs rose high. "Justice begins here. Vance Justice Initiative, because silence is not safety." The Vance Justice Initiative will become a sanctuary for survivors of systemic violence and their families, offering legal aid, trauma counseling, and community education. Camille would chair the oversight board herself. Darius would run the veteran outreach and youth reentry programs. Hundreds gathered for the grand opening. Reed Mallory reported live from the scene, while Sienna Ford streamed a special segment on her independent platform, captioned, "From personal pain to public purpose, Vance rewrote what it means to resist and to heal." Elsewhere, inside a federal prison deep in rural Georgia, Trent Halvorsen sat in silence, staring at the wall-mounted television, his face gaunt, his hair noticeably grayed. On screen, Camille held her son. The crowd applauded. Darius stood beside her, hand clasped over hers. And Halvorsen watched wordless. His world, once built on control and silence, had unraveled before his eyes. No smug grin remained. No more shouting. Only silence. And one quiet question echoing in Halvorsen's mind. If I had just taken one step back that day, would everything be different? But it was too late. In the fading light of evening, Camille sat on a wooden bench behind the new Justice Center. Kendrick lay peacefully asleep on her chest. Darius approached, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. They said nothing. They didn't need to. A group of neighborhood kids ran by, laughter filling the air. On the backs of their volunteer uniforms was a newly designed logo, a bright torch held between 2 uplifted hands, symbolizing hope, justice, and community. In a post-ceremony interview, when asked why they chose the name Kendrick, Camille looked directly into the camera and answered, "Because the name means the brave one. And I want my son to grow up knowing that courage doesn't mean not being afraid. It means knowing what's worth facing your fear for." And in the hearts of millions who had followed their journey, from a brutal kick in a parking lot to this very moment, The Vance family hadn't just reclaimed justice. They had redefined how a community can rise from grief. The story of Camille and Darius Vance isn't just an indictment of injustice. It is proof that even when pushed to the edge of despair, we can stand again, not with hatred, but with courage and with love for family, for community. We can't erase the past, but we can choose how to write the future. And sometimes it all begins with one person saying, "I will not stay silent." If this story moved you, leave a comment below. What do you think is the most important ingredient in building a fairer society? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to help Mr. 7 Stories share more powerful stories for justice, for compassion, and for all of us